All right, so we were chatty today, and that's okay. So we've been trying to understand the issue of government by exegeting passages of Scripture. So instead of approaching it as a principal point, we want to wrestle with the text and then draw some principles from it. And so this upcoming Sunday morning, we're actually going to look at one of the texts I had planned on us looking at, the Render the Caesar passage. So we'll be able to skip that in our Wednesday night study. So we looked at Genesis 9 in the post-flood world. And we want to look now in the Mosaic Law. There's a passage that tells us what to look for in a king, in a political leader, which is not ironic. It's interesting because Israel has no king. Israel is not to have a king. Yet Moses puts in the record that when the day comes and they ask for a king, what should they look for? So what I want to do is we want to look through the text, we want to dive into it, and then I think we can pull some principles about what should we seek in political leadership. Now, some of these can just apply to leadership in general, but particularly the issue is leadership in government. Let's start in Deuteronomy 17, start in verse 14, end of the chapter. When you come to the land that the Lord your God has given you, and you possess it and dwell in it, and then say, I will set a king over me like all the nations that are around me, you may indeed set a king over you, whom the Lord your God will choose. One from among your brothers you shall set as a king over you. You may not put a foreigner over you who is not your brother. Only he must not acquire many horses for himself, or cause the people to return to Egypt in order to acquire many horses. Since the Lord has said to you, you shall never return that way again. And he shall not acquire many wives for himself, lest his heart turn away, nor shall he acquire for himself excessive silver and gold. When he sits on the throne of his kingdom, he shall write for himself in a book a copy of this law, approved by the Levitical priest, and it shall be with him, and he shall read it in all the days of his life. He may learn to fear the Lord his God by keeping all the words of this law and these statutes and doing them, that his heart may not be lifted up above his brothers, and that he may not turn aside from the commandment, either to the right hand or to the left, so he may continue long in his kingdom, he and his children in Israel. Do you know what are the qualifications to be president of the United States? Can you name any of them? Got to be 35 and above. Yeah, so natural born citizen is the Constitution, whatever natural born means, right? Because that was a matter of real debate. Because John McCain, he was not born in the United States, he was born military base, right? So that made him a natural born citizen. Because I remember a lot of that was Obama stuff. So I remember there was a lot of back and forth, both parties. It's why Arnold Schwarzenegger can't be president. It's why Elon Musk can't be president. Elon Musk is a literal African American. He's from South Africa.
You can't get your citizenship.
Yeah, that doesn't count. Natural born. And again, there's debate as to what does that mean. Traditionally, it means you are born in the United States. And obviously with McCain, with military and all that. One other thing is, now this, it makes sense, but anyways, you have to have been a resident of the United States for 14 years. So you have to be natural born, but you can leave. But before you run, you have to have been here for at least, I don't know, I ain't a liar. I Googled this, and this is what it gave me, okay? So, but that's it. That is all the qualifications you have to be president of the United States. That is very American. That is too American. If you like, you would think we ought to update that, you know. But then again, what are they going to put in there? You know, that's where I get nervous. Well, what we have here is essentially something very similar. What do we to look for in the king? We're going to skip this that part. But so what we find here is 16 and 17 is going to mix the issues of justice and proper worship. The writer goes back and forth. Moses goes back and forth. For example, go back to chapter 16, verse 18. 16, verse 18 is the end of chapter 16. You shall appoint judges and officers in all your towns that the Lord your God has given you. So here is a government office. It's a role. judges. Okay, and what are their qualifications? Well, you have to appoint them according to your tribes. They shall judge the people with righteous judgment, which means you shall not pervert justice, you shall not show partiality, you shall not accept a bribe, for a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and subverts the cause of the righteous. Justice and only justice you shall follow, that you may live and inherit the land the Lord your God is giving you. So you can see that justice is the highest priority when it comes to the role of judges, obviously. And we take this for granted. But most cultures, you've had a corruption of justice. In fact, around the world right now, this is a major problem. And there's been pockets of it in the United States. It's why we think of Lady Justice as being blind, either blindfold or covering her eyes. The scales of justice are equal. This is very much a biblical principle. But starting in chapter 16, verse 21, all the way down to chapter 17, verse 7, he addresses the issue of idolatry. So I want you to notice here that the role of faithfulness and justice, how they go hand in hand. So, for example, in chapter 17, verse 2, there is idolaters are punished. If there is found among you within any of your towns that the Lord your God has given you, a man or woman who does what is evil in the sight of the Lord your God in transgressing his covenant, and has gone and served other gods and worshipped them, or the sun or the moon or any of the host of heaven, which I have forbidden, and it is told you, and you hear of it, then you shall inquire diligently, and if it is true and certain that such an abomination has been done in Israel, then you shall bring out to your gates that man or woman who has done this evil thing. You shall stone that man or woman to death with stones. Seems harsh, okay? Stick with me. What matters is you have the establishment of justice and judges upon equality and fairness, no bribes, all that. And then it's going to address proper worship, because that's the bedrock of this theocracy. If everyone's on the same page of worshiping God, right? But notice what it says starting in verse 6. On the evidence of 2 witnesses or of 3 witnesses, the one who is to die shall be put to death. A person shall not be put to death on the evidence of 1 witness. The hand of the witnesses shall be first against him to put him to death, and afterward the hand of all the people. So you shall purge the evil from your midst. Now you see the standard that is set for punishment. Often we read this as saying, well, you're just rounding up witches, like at Salem, witch trial all over again. No. What it is that if you are willing to make the accusation and stand in the dock and say that person is guilty of a capital crime, you, to use the phrase of Jesus, you cast the first stone. And so you see that you got your 2 or 3 witnesses or more, they throw the first stones. Right? So you have the idea of justice is very much rooted in their theology, that you have uninterested third-party judges who they take in the evidence, they weigh it, and they give their verdict, but then the people themselves, they have to carry it out, because to accuse someone of a crime, particularly of a capital crime, is not to be taken lightly. So much so that it requires multiple witnesses. Well, we have that even today. Good luck getting a capital crime passed with the testimony of 1 witness. Now, you may have a primary witness, but on 1 witness, it's rare it's enough. Now, your other witness may be DNA or something like that. But if all you have is a he said, she said sort of situation, it gets really messy. Unless it's 2 celebrities and then we're all entertained by it. In chapter 17, verse 8 to 13, we get the discussion of the verdict of judges and priests. Priests were to verify the content of the Mosaic law. The judge was to make the verdict based off of the evidence. So there was this, you see this balance of power. So the judge doesn't have full authority to do whatever it is he wants. So you have the people are carrying out the punishment. Priests are verifying that the law is being upheld, and the judges there are giving their verdict. But their decision is final, and to not carry out the verdict of the judge is itself a capital crime. So these positions are high and influential, but there is a checks and balance embedded in it, and the system is very careful about throwing accusations against judges. So you can see that there's a high standard for judges, there's a high standard for the people. Everyone is involved here. And then we can go down to our passage, chapter 17, verse 14 to 20, is the calling, qualification, responsibilities of the king. So it all comes together. So we've been talking about this centrality of proper worship in Israel. We've had the issue of justice with your judges and your priests and the people. Now the text is ready to address the issue of the king, which of course they don't have one yet, although Moses is more like a prophet, judge, something like that. So what then should we look for in a king? What are they to look for in a king? And the first one is loyalty to his people. This is verse 15. You may indeed set a king over you, whom the Lord your God will choose. One from among your brothers you shall set a king over you. You may not put a foreigner over you who is not your brother. Now, this is American law. Right? Of the three qualifications to be the President of the United States, two of them has to do with your residence and your citizenship. You have to be born an American citizen. And you have to be in America as an American citizen for at least 14 years. Now, why is that so important? Because of loyalty. Your interests is that of your neighbor. Now, what you have here, in addition to that, is the concern with syncretism. That is that if you have someone who is not an Israelite, who has grown up among the Canaanites, the concern is they're going to come and assume the throne, and they're going to introduce foreign gods into Israel. And that is a big, big no-no. In fact, that's what happened with the monarchy. Solomon introduced all of these women who brought all of their gods and all of their idols and all their shrines with them, and they led his heart astray. The wisest man is equally the most foolish of all men. If you want a good illustration of this, that's somewhat tongue-in-cheek. I was actually talking to a guy at the Capitol today about this. When Danny Crum retired from coaching at the University of Louisville, I'm going somewhere with this, the athletic director came out. He says, I have one person I'm going to interview, and only one person. It was Rick Pitino. Does anyone remember what Louisville fans, what they thought about that initially? It's a terrible idea. Why? He's the Kentucky coach. He won a national championship, essentially won a second one with Tubby, it was Pitino's players. And so he went to 2 straight national championships, and he left, and the team he left behind, they won a national championship. So, I mean, yeah, he's kind of a big deal. He's at UK. He doesn't belong at U of L. And to this day, and Louisville fans softened to him, because we were winning games. Now, Louisville fans looking back, they'll say, well, now we know why we couldn't beat Kentucky all those years. He didn't want to beat Kentucky. Because he was always making those comments about how that's the promised land, University of Kentucky. That's the greatest job in basketball and all that sort of stuff. But Louisville fans are like, see, we should have never hired him to begin with. Right? And it's a silly illustration, but that's concern. So loyalty and to avoid syncretism. Secondly, I put humble to a fault. Notice verse 16 that he must avoid military might. Only he must not acquire many horses for himself or cause the people to return to Egypt nor to acquire many horses. Remember, don't go back to Egypt. Guess what Solomon does? He gets chariots from Egypt. And people marvel at his chariots. And the reader of the Bible thinks, oh, yeah, did he not read that part? You don't do that. And remember that when a king builds an army, and the people along with him, they trust their military more than their God. And so what the writer's concerned with is that his heart will turn to pride. He has power, and then now he has might to go along with it. And so he'll no longer trust that the Lord will protect Israel. He'll trust in his own army. Humility. Same thing in verse 17, dealing with greed. Don't acquire many wives for himself. We'll come back to that. Lest his heart turn away. Nor shall he acquire for himself excessive silver and gold. Do not use power, influence, and position as a means of enriching yourself. If only I can make an application to the U.S. government right now. This is a problem within the U.S. government right now. Like, you realize that a lot of your national figures, we know what their pay is, and they have one job, to be a congressman, whatever it is. And you're thinking, okay, so you make six figures as it is, but you're bringing in like 9. Like, where's all that other money coming from? And it raises questions. It does. Whether things are legal or not, it just raises questions. That when you see people use position for personal gain, now you run the threat of corruption, bribery, and everything else. The humble man will say, I may be able to gain the system for my own benefit, but I refuse to do that. By the way, this is a big debate when it comes to paying legislators and paying politicians in general. Kentucky has a part-time legislator. That is, they get paid part-time salary. Whereas in California, it's full-time pay salary. So which one is better? They both have advantages and disadvantages. You can think of them. If the salary package is good, again, if you're a congressman, you're making 6 figures, okay? That's not preacher money, okay? And so you think, okay, then the temptation is to pursue that for my own personal wealth. Okay, you can say that. But then you can do what's in Kentucky, and what you'll find is that because this position won't pay the bills, that it only attracts those who don't need the money. Maybe they're retired, or they have a business, or they're lawyers, or have something like that. I don't know the answer to this riddle, but it is a riddle that we can't seem to figure out. And thirdly, under humble to a fault, they just need to be humble. Go down to verse 20. That his heart may not be lifted up above his brothers, he may not turn aside from the commandment, either to his right or his left, he may continue long in the kingdom, he and his children Israel. So he is not to lift himself up above his brother. Think about how radical that is. You won't find this outside of Judeo-Christian ethic, that the king may have a lot of power, but he's no better than those under his authority. By the way, this is what makes the church so beautiful. A doctor can sit in the Sunday school class of a janitor and learn from the same word. Because that janitor has years of experience, knowledge, and insight that doctor, well educated as he might be, needs to hear from that uneducated man who can barely read. That's the beauty of the kingdom of God. And that's the system here, is that the king is not better than those under his authority. That's an act of humility. It's very, very tough, and it's hard to do that. The example that comes to mind is from 9/11. Mayor Rudy Giuliani, we all have our opinions about him. But you remember what he did on 9/11? He went out to rescue people from the towers. Now, that says something about him as a leader. But he had to be told by the people under him, look, this is awesome, but we have a system in place of people who do this, and they're better trained. We cannot lose the mayor today. We need you on the phone with the president. We need you telling us where to go and what to do. Trust them. So like, I love the fact of my people are hurting. I got to go rescue them. Like, that's the instinct. At the same time, a humble leader can say, I can trust other people to do this that I feel like I should do, but I can trust them this because they're better at it than me. What I'm needed in the situation is these other things. Okay? Humble to a fault is the second one. The third one I see here is devoted to the home. Verse 17, we've already read it a few times. He may not acquire many wives for himself, lest his heart turn away. Think of Solomon. Think of David. After all, Bathsheba. Think of many of the kings. That history, their position is a means by which they surround themselves with multiple wives. It's interesting that the faithfulness to one's wife is a qualification for government leadership. By the way, that's true of church leadership, spiritual leadership. I mean, that's something worth meditating on. Because what does the New Testament tell us? If you can't manage your household, how can you manage all these other households? You just can't do it. A man who's unfaithful to his wife will be unfaithful to his church, will be unfaithful to his country. That is a very real threat. And let's be honest, the last 50 years, America just sort of gave that stuff up. Oh, Clinton, I mean, my goodness. I mean, keep going back. I mean, JFK and LBJ were among the worst. And you can look at others. FDR's wife wanted a divorce. Eleanor Roosevelt wanted a divorce because of his unfaithfulness. And she said, we will never be intimate again because of this. But because you're president, I'll stick around. No? Yeah. I mean, that's a problem. That's a problem. Look, Jacqueline Kennedy. I mean, my goodness. I mean, she knew what her husband was doing. Much of it, we would say, was illegal, frankly. And that's not good. That's not good. If there's no self-control in the home, there will not be self-control when power, influence, and might is handed to you. I mean, faithfulness to a wife is so important. Fourthly is faithfulness to God. We get this in verse 18 to 20. Notice that when he sits on his throne, what is he supposed to be doing? Writing out the law of God. Now, whether you do that literally or not, of course, the point is that he knows the law, he's intimate with the law, he meditates upon it, he's shaped by it. That his virtue is rooted in his faith, which is what we've seen with everything that is a precursor to this. Judges must judge justly, and no bribes, all that sort of stuff. Well, then you're going to talk about proper worship. Why? Because this undergirds equal justice and fair judges. So if you want a king that will walk in humility and lead well, what's going to undergird that is his faithfulness to his God. And so he has to be obedient to the law. Because he wants his people to uphold the law in their lives, he must uphold the law in his life. This is standard. What can we get from this? I think I have just three thoughts, and we'll call it a day. So I think these are the four qualifications I see from this text. You can modify them, maybe add or take away one if you want to. But I think this is a decent summary of what you ought to look for in the king. I would say this is a good summary that we should have now. Right? I don't see anything there that we should just skip because it's Old Testament. I want my political leaders, mayor, governor, congressman, dog catcher, president, the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I want them loyal to their nation. I want that. Now, I understand we have this globalist idea and all that sort of stuff that, but at the end of the day, nations exist for a reason. And the priority has to be those in whom you have authority over. I love a lot of families. I love your family. I care about your family. But my primary responsibility as a husband and father is towards mine. And so I want leaders who understand that my authority is the state or the city or the community or the neighborhood or the country. And so I want to be loyal and faithful to them. Whatever their needs are, that's my priority. Their priority is mine. And I want humble leaders. Humble leaders. They're hard to find. Very hard to find. Look, the truth is, to take on such prominent, stressful positions, President of the United States or the head coach of UK or U of L, you have to have an ego. You have to. Now, the best thing you need is meekness. Meekness is the biblical term that leaves room for confidence, but it is showered with humility. It is to say, I have a vision for the state, a vision for this community, or there are some things I think we could do better, and I feel a sense of calling, and I want to accomplish those things, and then I can step away. You can hear the meekness there, but there's confidence in that. I've got good experience. I have a plan. And I think we can accomplish something there. So humility isn't an all shucks sort of thing. There's plenty of room for ambition and confidence, but it has to be showered with meekness. Devoted to the home. I mean, I think that is just so critical. Because at the end of the day, the most important government in any nation is the home. It is. And of course, faithfulness to God. So virtue and faith is so important when it comes to our government leaders. So what are some concluding thoughts we could add here? First of all, virtue matters as much as competency in leadership. Now, you have to have competency. We've had leaders at all kinds of levels, and you may think of one or two. top of your head, who, in terms of virtue, they're the cream of the crop, right? Man, they just, no one had anything bad to say about them. They just didn't know what they were doing. Right? That's not good. Competency is important. However, what I am seeing on the right and the left, particularly at the national level, is we care more about competency as we define it rather than virtue. What we want is, I want what I want, and what I want is to put an end to that other side. And the left and right are doing this. And if the person I choose lacks virtue, that may even be better for us, because they have no restraint in destroying the other side, the other half of the nation. That should concern us. It really should. Virtue matters, and we've just lost that as a country. Secondly, worship shapes a nation more than leadership. A nation can weather poor leadership. It cannot weather faithlessness. This is a problem we're seeing right now. When I read the Old Testament, one of the things you'll find is that the prophets will come and condemn the nation. And then the king and the people are like, what are you talking about? God's blessing us. Look at our economy. Look at our military. Look at all this. We're wonderful. And the prophet comes and says, yeah, but you're hollow. You're hollow. You assume that because you can pay your bills and that no one is attacking you, and everyone seems to be getting along fine, everything is fine. But you're not. You're a hollow shell. And it doesn't take much for a nation that's lost virtue and has forsaken its God to crumble. And that is my concern with the United States of America. It's not military might. No, I mean, let's be honest. And in the last 9 days of new administration, our president has, whether you love him or hate him, I'm not giving an opinion. I have forgotten just how big and powerful the United States of America is. And I've never seen a president, because I'm born in '84, so I don't remember Reagan much. I've not seen a president just say, look, we're the United States of America, we're going to do whatever it is I want. 100% tariffs, there you go. Do what we want. I've not seen that before. Love it or hate it, I've not seen that. And the impression we get as Americans is, we get our way, we're the most powerful, we're the biggest, therefore everything's okay. And if I'm reading my Bible right, that's not true at all. We should be, I think, quite concerned. And you can see elements of our faithlessness and our lack of virtue. And I don't want to give specifics, I want to avoid politics, but I'm sure we can think of plenty of them. I mean, I'll give some non-political. No fathers are in the home. This nation will not function. You want to see an absence of leadership moving forward? That's the Genesis. That's the Genesis. Dads raise leaders. They do. And we're not raising leaders right now. There's not. And we can point to other things. Our spending is out of control. Not just at the government level, though that is, but just at the personal level. Google what the average debt of Americans are. So just imagine just how virtuous we will be when the lights go off. We'll see how virtuous we are then. Think about it. Lights on at night are keeping us from killing one another. That's how virtuous we are. And so I think worship shapes a nation. Actually, think of it this way. Often you may hear the phrase that politics is downstream from culture. That's true. That whenever politics is one of the easiest way we can measure things culturally, but what happens in politics is a reflection of the culture. In fact, you've probably seen some analysis that it looks like, and I've said this from the first time in my life, America seems to be making a turn towards the right. I've not seen that. Why? There seems to be a cultural move in that direction, led by young men, by the way. Whereas my whole life, I've seen the government go more towards the left, bigger governments, government, it seems to grow and grow and grow with larger budgets. Why? Because the culture has gone more left. The moral issues, everything else. But culture is downstream from theology and worship. What shapes culture is our virtues and our values and the God we worship. So worship is so important. And that's what you're getting here. Yeah, let's talk about judges. Let's talk about idolatry. That's going to undergird it. Let's talk about a king. He better be writing down the law of God. Thirdly, government is limited. It is limited. What's interesting is when scholars come to this, and I think we have to be careful about drawing too big of a conclusion here. the king is never described as making laws here. Isn't that interesting? He's not described making laws. He's assumed to have an army, so long as it isn't too big, and the army is for protection. He's never described as making laws. And so I think the reason that you have in Judges described, the king over here, and in the middle is the section on idolatry, I think the Bible is trying to remind us that there are limits on government that have to be respected. The worst thing you can do is to elevate government to the level of deity. Now, what you had in the ancient world is the king claimed for himself deity. We don't do that now. What we've done is the opposite, where the king elevates himself to the level of God, among the gods. What we've done is we have downgraded God to the point he's not really around. And so in that vacuum, government comes in and wants to solve all the problems. Now, when it comes to the limits of government, I wish you the best in figuring all that out. I don't have all the answers. I have opinions, and they're probably wrong. But it is difficult knowing where government should go and no farther, and is there room to rescind government and all that sort of stuff. And that's where a lot of political debate is. But what is clear is that government is subject to the will and the way of God. The king must be well acquainted with Scripture, because the king is himself under God, as is the people he leads. So there's a limitation to government. Well, I'm sure you all are familiar with the British monarchy. I don't know why it exists outside of ceremonial reasons, but the Brits are just, I don't know, they love it, I guess. But between King Henry VII and Queen Elizabeth II, King Henry VIII, and Queen Elizabeth II. So you're going from the 16th century, of course, King Henry, the most famous of the British kings, to Queen Elizabeth, who just recently passed away. Every one of those kings and queens had shared the same title. And it comes back from the Reformation of England. I'm sure you know the story. The Tudor king, Henry VIII, wanted to divorce his wife. He apparently didn't read Deuteronomy 17. Actually, Catherine Aragon is Aragorn is a Lord of the Rings reference. I owe you $1. Catherine Aragon from Spain originally was supposed to marry Prince Arthur, who died, so he ended up marrying King Henry, Prince Henry VIII. Anyways, when Henry VIII broke from Rome, he established his own church we call the Church of England, the Anglican Church. In America, it's called the Episcopalian Church. And it's basically Catholicism without the Pope. However, so remember that in Catholic theology, the head of the church is the Pope. Just don't read your Bible and look for that. Because the Bible's clear the head of the church is Christ. Henry VIII took for himself the title, the head of the church. And so to this day, that's sort of my point I'm trying to make. From Henry VIII to Queen Elizabeth II, the monarch of England took for themselves the title, the defender of the faith. Okay? Because they're head of the church. And so they appointed who was the bishop of here, and they appointed all these sort of positions. For the first time since Henry VIII, 16th century, 500 years, the current king that sits on the throne is not accepting that title. You want to know what title King Charles II, is he number 2? You want to know what title he's chosen for himself? He has said this for years. This isn't new. He's not the defender of the faith. He's the defender of faith. Charles has bought into all the postmodern rhetoric and has for decades. I've known this since I was at Boys College. Dr. Miller always mentioned it. The defender of faith, no article. Why? Because as king, let's all light a candle, sing the Coca-Cola theme song, and all get along. And it reflects where England has gone spiritually. And things are quite a mess over there right now. Yeah, that's exactly. I bet you could find a quote of him saying something like that. Yeah. Now, Queen Elizabeth, seemed pretty genuine in her faith, but King Charles isn't. Now, at his coronation, they had all the Anglican rites and the sermons and the songs and did all of that. But for himself, he wants to be not the defender of the faith, but the defender of faith. These issues matter for government. and often we just rarely discuss them. So I find this to be a helpful passage when exploring government. What should we look for in our leaders? And I think this is a good place to start. All right. Danny's not here and Don's not here to pick on me. So any thoughts y'all have? All right. Lonnie, you close us in prayer?
Dear God, thank you